Alright, so this lesson today is a quiz. Don't forget that this is a quiz score, that I am actually grading this, and that you need to make sure you write everything I write. The other part it is a actual lesson. That lesson is a test and quiz review. Sorry, I can't spell. But anyway, but this actually has a few things in it. Again, this is a quiz in itself. It's a lesson that you got to make sure that you learn, because everything in here we haven't seen before. The first page that you're working on right now actually is a lesson. It's material that you've never seen, so we need to talk about that. But it's also just kind of looking through the stuff and making sure we talk about the stuff you're going to see on tomorrow's quiz, because tomorrow is Friday. So you do have a quiz on this stuff, so make sure that you have that. But again, it's also just talking about what you're going to see on the test and what you need to be aware of, because there's still some things that we've learned that we haven't really seen that are on the highest level. So let's talk about it now. Oh, another reason why we do this is because on those days, whenever I do have to take a day off, this is the second semester, and there are a lot of days when the school needs me to go places. And so what I like to do anytime I have a day off is I like to make sure that you can actually get some points for yourself. Since I have to be gone, I like to give you a quiz to make sure that you can actually get some points to help yourself out. But either way, first question says, what two things does M represent? And if you remember all this stuff that we did, we talked about M representing slope and M representing rate of change. So again, M is slope, M is rate of change. That was the two things that we learned about. Just making sure that we knew. Again, that was chapter 4. This is actually chapter 5. You want to make sure you know both of those two words, because those words are important, especially whenever you see them in problems that are in the book that we're going to be seeing. Two things that B represents we talked about was initial, INITIAL, initial value, and also Y, intercept. And again, it's important that you understand what these four words are, what they actually mean. Again, initial value is usually your starting point. I think we're going to see that today. What we learned yesterday in graphing, that's where you remember that is it's your y-intercept, which is where it crosses the y-axis. And again, just kind of reviewing and warming up on these questions. In a word problem, how do we know there's value to use for M? We've seen this before. That was where we actually did the last, again, chapter. The words that you're looking for are each, per, every. It could say such and such a day. Like it's $2 a day, or $5 a person. Anything at all that kind of does stuff like that is what you're going to know, because remember that M is attached to X, and what we learned last chapter was that these words attach your number, whatever that number is, to X. Again, we're going to kind of see that there. How do we know what value to use for B? Well, what you want to know about B is, again, in this case, especially in a word problem, is that we're talking about a starting point. Initial value again means starting point. Yesterday we used the B part, which was the y-intercept to graph. Today in the word problems you're going to use the B part, which is your initial value or your starting point. So again, that is how you know what B is, because you know that that's where you're starting. So looking at these word problems here, again, the words are kind of intimidating, but you want to make sure that you pay attention to what numbers are in there and whether they're important. Here it says polar bears are listed as a threatened species in 2005. There are 25,000 polar bears in the world. If the number of bears declines by 1,000 each year, write a linear equation to represent the number of bears X years after 2005. Now here's the thing. There is a number here and here, 2005, but I don't think that number is really a major number, because to me, if you're looking for a keyword here, you have 1,000 each year, which means that that's obviously going to be our M. And we're also looking for a starting point. Yes, it was in 2005, but we're talking about polar bears. And if we want to know about polar bears, they are starting off with 25,000. So on this problem here, the 2005 is kind of to distract you a little bit. What we're looking at here is if we're doing y equals mx plus b, your m, again the one that gets the variable, is 1,000 each year, so it'll be 1,000x. 25,000 is where we started, and that would be your actual equation. And that's all it's asking. Again, write a linear equation is your y equals mx plus b. It gives us an m, so we plug that in. It gives us a starting point, we plug that in, and that's it. Alright, so again, part of what you have to be able to do is look at the problem and recognize that the number that you're looking at is not important, so you don't let that confuse you. And again, all you have to do is copy it. We'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow before you take your quiz. I'm not just going to start the quiz tomorrow and not at least chat about it, but just make sure you have this written down, make sure you at least get the score, and then tomorrow you can ask the questions that you really need to ask if I'm not in class, because I'm not in some of my classes today. Suppose you have $5 off coupon at a fabric store. You buy fabric that costs $7.50 per yard. Write an equation that models the total amount of money you pay if you buy X yards of fabric. Again, two numbers here. Notice $7.50 per yard. That tells me that's probably my M. It has a $5 off coupon, which isn't really a starting point, but because there's no other number, I know it has to be a B, but just be careful how we use that. So what we're going to do is recognize that $7.50 per yard would be 7.50x, but it's $5 off, which means that if it's $5 off, you're talking about a taking 5 away from the cost. So again, $5 off is not just plus 5. You're not buying this fabric for $7.50 and then adding $5 to the cost. You're actually taking $5 off, which is again where you have to be careful and make sure you understand. Again, you're going to take that 5 and make it negative. Part of this lesson today is making sure we read, which is why I'm just giving you a bunch of different problems today on word problems, because you have to honestly read to see whether that B is positive or negative, whether your M is positive or negative. Now, there's not a lot of them where their M is negative, but it does exist, and you need to make sure you read carefully. The temperature at sunrise is 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Each hour the temperature rises 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Write an equation that models the temperature. Again, once you see write an equation, that means you're looking at your y equals mx plus b. Now you want to look for your information, especially in a word problem. And notice it says each hour it rises 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which means obviously that's your 5. Now here again, you got to think about it. If it was dropping 5 degrees Fahrenheit, that would actually be a negative 5 because it would be going down. And that's where you need to make sure you read carefully. But since it's rising 5 degrees, that is where we're going to put our 5x. And again, our starting point is that it started off at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, that's a positive 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's what you're going to have there. Alright. Again, that is your stopping point. Number 8 talks about a computer repair service, 50 for diagnosis, 35 per hour. Again, hopefully you're starting to see the pattern here where you're starting to see the word per just pop right up into the problem and kind of tell you what you're doing. Some of these, again, are pretty easy because there's just two numbers. We just have to make sure whenever there's more than two that we don't get confused on a number that doesn't matter. Again, computer repair service charges $50 for diagnosis. Here's your 35 per hour, which means obviously that's going to be my M. So 35x, and again your starting number here is 50 because once you take the computer in, they're going to charge you $50 to look at it and make sure that they can see what they're going to have to do. So your 50 is your starting point, and then every hour they actually add another 35. So again, that's what you need to be ready for. Suppose you're doing a 5,000 piece puzzle. You've already placed 175 pieces. Every minute you place 10 more pieces. Write an equation to represent the situation. Again, in this case, you have to make sure you understand there are three numbers, and you only need two. You need an M and a B. So let's look carefully. Again, each per and every. Notice it said every minute you place 10 more pieces, so what that's going to tell me is that this is my M. You literally just look and seek whatever you're looking for and kind of use that number to where you need it. Our starting point is going to be tricky because, again, even though that 5,000 is here, that 5,000 isn't really where I started. That's a 5,000 piece puzzle. It says that I already placed 175 pieces. So if you imagine this situation, you've got 175 pieces down to start. You're putting 10 pieces every minute, and your goal is 5,000, which is why 5,000 really isn't even important to you, because it's not a starting point. That is actually your ending point, because you want to finish with 5,000 pieces. So you would actually add 175 in this number. So hopefully you're starting to see it's just a word game. Whenever you're doing the equation based off of a word problem, you kind of read it, you look for what you need, and then you fill in whatever you need to do for your M and your B. Sailboat begins the voyage with 145 pounds of food. Crew plans to eat a total of 15 pounds of food per day. Write an equation that represents the food supply. Again, we're talking y equals mx plus b. We find our m by finding the word each, per, or every. From what I see, we're eating 15 pounds of food per day, and again, this is where you have to be careful. We are eating 15 pounds of food per day, and you have to think about the fact that if you're eating 15 pounds of food per day, your food is not going to go up. It's going to actually go down, which means that this represents a negative 15. Alright, so again, your 15 here is negative because you're taking it away from your starting point, which is 145. So again, you're starting with 145 pounds of food. After one day, and you eat 15 pounds, it should drop to 30, which if I put a 1 in here just to show you, 15 times 1, negative 15 times 1 plus 145, it makes sense that there would be 130 pounds of food, not if I did it the way that we initially had it, which is 15 times 1 plus 145, that we would have 160 pounds of food. So again, that negative slope is important that you read and understand it. Again, this situation here is a negative rate of change because it's going down. Your food is actually going the opposite direction of where you want it to go. And so you have to kind of represent that with a negative sign in that problem. A tree is 76 inches tall and expected to grow 2 inches per year. If the height of the tree is represented by an equation, what does the equation look like? Again, we're talking about an equation, so we're talking y equals mx plus b. Looking for the m, again, the tree's growing 2 inches per year, which automatically tells me it's going to be 2x. It's starting at 76 inches tall already. Again, it's growing 2, which is why that's positive. It's starting at 76. Easy enough. That's the equation we're looking for. Some of them are pretty evident, so I don't need to say a lot. A student has $25 in his account and spends $3.50 each day. Write an equation. Again, once they want the equation, we're looking at y equals mx plus b. Looking at this word, $3.50 each day, means obviously that that's your slope, but again, you must be careful because they are spending $3.50 each day. So they're not putting $3.50 each day in the account, they're actually taking $3.50 each day, which tells me that my slope should be negative. So negative 350x, and then 25 is your starting point because that's already what's in that account, and that is our stopping point there. So again, just make sure whenever you do this, when it counts on your map test, on your ACT stuff, that you pay attention to whether the actual number is, whether this number is adding to your starting point or taking away from your starting point, because that's going to be your main problem. Snow fell for 7 hours at a rate of 1/2 inch per hour before the snowstorm began. There were already 3 inches of snow on the ground. Write an equation to model the depth of snow on the ground after X hours. Again, the problem we have here is that we have 3 numbers, and anytime I know it's going to be a y equals mx plus b, I need to make sure I know which number doesn't need to be used. So typically, again, the easiest one to find is m, and in this case, snow fell for 7 hours, 1/2 inch per hour, so I know that I'm going to use y equals 1/2 x, which means my question is which one of these numbers is important. And the way you can look at it is kind of looking and saying, does snow falling for 7 hours affect the amount of snow that it is, or that there were already 3 inches? Which one of these represents a starting point? To me, is not the 7 hours. The 7 hours is just telling me the overall picture that this happened for 7 hours. The starting point is actually that there were already 3 inches of snow on the ground, which is why what I'm looking at here is that this is actually my starting point, and that I want to add 3 to the amount of snow. Again, snow is 1/2 inch per hour. You're talking snow here, you're talking about how much snow on the ground. That is 3 inches of snow. Hours has nothing to do with the amount of snow on the ground. Now it does tell you how long it did snow, which can affect it, but directly, this is 3 inches of snow, which is good. That's 1/2 inches of snow per hour, but that's 7 hours, which again means that 7 honestly isn't even important to us in terms of that equation. What it does mean is that if you're talking about the amount of snow on the ground, don't plug in an 8, a 9, or a 10, because you only snow for 7 hours, and so it would go against what the problem initially told you. Sam opened a banking account with $300. Each paycheck, Sam deposits $25 into the account. Write the equation. Again, we're talking another y equals mx plus b. Notice each paycheck, Sam deposits $25. Again, make sure you read carefully and understand that deposits and withdrawals are two different things at a bank. Deposit is when you put the money in, withdrawals when you take the money out. So since you are depositing 25, that actually is a positive 25x because it's going to help you out. And again, you open it, or Sam opened it with $300, which means that it's going to be your starting point of 300. Hannah pays $300 in advance on her phone bill. Each month, $25 is deducted from her account. Write an equation. Again, you're talking y equals mx plus b. In this situation, again, each month $25 is deducted, but again, you must read. Don't just get the 25 and put down 25x, because if $25 is deducted, remember that deducted means it is taking away from the 300, so that would actually be a negative 25x, and then 300 is in the account already, and so that is your starting point there. Salesperson earns $18 per hour plus a $75 bonus for meeting their quota. Write an equation to represent the earnings for working. Again, we recognize that we have two numbers, so we're looking at y equals mx plus b. We have an 18 per hour. Again, that is earned, which means it's good. And the 18 does go with the 75 that they get for making their quota, which is their goal for the day. So again, 18 per hour plus $75 bonus for meeting the quota means that 18 is obviously your M. And then $75 bonus is what you get extra. Now that's not really a starting point, but it even says in here 18 per hour, which is your 18 times x, plus 75, which is exactly what you see whenever you read that question. All right. From what I see in my questions, that would be the whole front side of your page. That front side of your page was the last part of 5, or actually this first major part of 5.3c. These questions here, these two questions here, are the second part of 5.3c, and so we're going to actually be wrapping up the 5.3 lesson part right now, and then we're going to go into the review and wrap up the day. I don't know if there's a Math Excel assignment yet, but I will know by the time I finish the video as to whether there's going to be one. The equation y equals 8x plus 3 represents the amount of money earned selling x cups of lemonade. Who cares about the words? What we're looking at here is anytime they give you an equation in the problem, it should be an easy problem. And in this problem, it really should be, because they want the initial value. We know from our experience that initial value is the letter b. We also understand that the letter b in the formula y equals mx plus b is the number that's by itself, which means that in this case your initial value is 3. Rate of change we understand to be the letter m. So rate of change being m, m being attached to x, means that your rate of change should be 8. That's all you have to do on that question, is understand what initial value and rate of change look like. And again, remember that rate of change is m. M is attached to x, which means that that has to be 8. The reason I say that, and I know you might have thought, well, why is he taking so long? It's easy, is because they don't always give you the numbers in order. Again, if initial value is b, and b is the number that's by itself, in this problem here, the number by itself is 4. And that's where you have to be careful. The other part about it is, if this 0.75 was negative, you'd have to make sure you bring it down for your rate of change. But again, if m is the number attached to x, then that is actually your rate of change. So it wasn't to kind of intimidate you, but it was just to make sure you're aware that if you're not careful on that question, you can pick up the wrong one, and you don't want to do that, especially if it's a quiz, especially if it's a test. You are going to see that kind of question on the quiz. So just again, make sure you remember that slope or rate of change is attached to x, and the value of b is by itself. So looking at our review, again, just make sure you copy and make sure you're at least understanding this stuff. Again, these are also quiz questions you're going to see. 6, 3, 3, 1, so we take our 6, 3, put it in a table. We take our 3, 1, put it in a table. We subtract 1 minus 3 on top, 3 minus 6 on the bottom. 1 minus 3 in our calculator is negative 2. 3 minus 6 in our calculator is negative 3. Again, making sure that we have that reduced. Turning that into a fraction because there's no decimals means that your answer is actually 2/3. Remember from your quizzes that you don't want to stop with 2 negatives, so anytime there's 2 negatives, make sure you at least type it in to make sure that it's, reduced, but that the negative actually goes away. Alright. On B, negative 4.26, negative 2.30. Again, once they're in a table, 0 minus 6 is what we have on top because we always go y minus y. And then x minus x would be negative 2.3 minus negative 4.2. Of course, 0 minus 6 is negative 6. But then you have to kind of check this one. So negative 2.3 minus negative 4.2 is actually 1.9. And then you have to divide negative 6 by 1.9. And again, because there's decimals in this problem already, we actually want the decimal in. So 3.15, 16, 167, or 157, any of those are good. I'm going to stop at the 15. So 3.16 is actually the slope here. And again, the reason I did that is because if I'm cutting off at the 5, that means the 7 bumps it up to be a 6, and that would be your actual answer there. Alright. Write the equation of a line with a slope of 5 that passes through negative 2, 3. Again, write the equation means we're doing y equals mx plus b. Because this test has so many different things and once you write an equation, you want to always make sure you ask yourself what you're looking for, because depending on the problem you can need different things. So again, you ask yourself, do I have an m? Do I have an m? M is slope. Slope is 5. That is yes. Do I have a b? It doesn't give me a starting point, it gives me a point, like an ordered pair, but it doesn't give me a starting point, which means that this is the one where I actually have to use this is x, and that is y, because if you remember, your ordered pair is always x first, y second. So our y number is 3, our m number is 5, our x number is negative 2, and this is what we're going to use to find b. And then 3 equals negative 10 plus b, which means now because that 10 is negative, we need to add 10. Again, when I was grading that exit pass the other day, that was the big mistake that people kept making, is they were subtracting 10, but 10 is already negative, which means you want to make it its opposite. That means that your final answer is y equals, here's your m, 5x, here's your b, plus 13. Alright, so again, just make sure you understand what's going on with that. That is also going to be on your quiz. So study that, and again, make sure you're ready for it, because I think you can do well tomorrow. Just make sure you at least study, make sure you're strong on the stuff that you know how to do, and then at least check out some things that you can add to your skill set if you're not up to speed yet. Graphing, I think, should be one of the things that you can definitely get up to speed on. And this one, remember that we're talking about m and b, so m is negative 3 because that's attached to x. B is 5 because that's not attached to x. Yesterday's lesson we talked about the fact that this is the first number we talk about or use because that is your y-intercept and that is the y-axis. This is my x-axis. We go to 5, which means from here we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we put a dot. With m being negative 3, remember we need a rise overrun, so we actually put a negative 3 over 1. And so from this dot we go down 3 over 1. I think I still have the cheap thing I had from before, since I am at home, for my line here. And you connect those 2 points. With the line. It is very important that that line goes all the way across the region, but again, we'll talk more about that as we go. My main thing right now is that you know how to do the 5 first and then drop 3 and go over 1. Also that because it's negative, you will not go left, you will always go to the right, and that you're ready to do that. B, y equals 1/4 x minus 2. Again, in this situation, m is 1/4, b is negative 2. Looking at this number first, because b is our number, we're looking for the y-intercept. You can't do 1/4, you can't go up 1/4 if there's no point to go from. So negative 2 means go down 2 and put your dot. Then your 1/4 here again is your rise over run. So it means from this dot we go up 1 and then over 1, 2, 3, 4. Make our dot, and again use a straight edge. But as I told you, if you don't use a straight edge, but you're at least good enough for me to draw a decently straight line, I'm not going to count it against you. Just don't make your line look like that, because that's really not a good line. I don't know what that is, but that's definitely not a line. Anyway, just make sure you at least have a straight enough line that I can see the representation of it. But if you use a straight edge, great. I do have rulers in class that you can borrow. Feel free to always come up and ask me for one of those. But the reason I don't do that is because since I always forget to pick up the rulers, it always ends up being like another thing that I have to pick up at the end of the day. And so I'd rather not add more to my workload whenever I'm already kind of scatterbrained and forget about that stuff. But if you do want a ruler and you want to walk over and ask for one, I do have one. I can always, get one for you and give it to you. But, it's up to you. 22 wants to know about the rate of change. And the wording is different. Again, this is how they actually word it on your test, and I want to make sure you see it. I know estimate means you want to get close to a point, but we actually can find the rate of change, which means that this doesn't actually mean you want to estimate the rate of change. It means you actually want to find the rate of change, so don't let the wording throw you off. And I am going to use this on the quiz tomorrow just to make sure you get used to it, because once you see rate of change and you see a line, you're going to go right into the mode of find 2 points and go from there. Now this question here purposefully gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And the reason it gives you 5 points is because it knows that you're looking for 2 and it wants you to make sure you're solid on your strategy, which means it doesn't really matter which 2 points you use, and I'm going to show you that because your answer will be the same no matter what. The bottom line is make sure you start from a left point. I could use this point here as a start, that point as an end, and if I do that, notice I go up 1, which is a rise of 1, over 2. Don't write all this yet, by the way, but that would be from this point. If I started here and ended there, notice I would go up 1, 2 and go over 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 2 over 4. Again, don't write this yet because I just want to show you, but if you look at 2 over 4, it's still 1/2. I could start from this point and go up 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 3 over 6. And of course you should see that 3 over 6 is the same as 1/2. You can start this one and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be your rise over run, which again is the same as 1/2. Same thing for this, up 2 over 4. For this, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. It does not matter which 2 you choose, but if I were you, if you don't want to get confused, I would just honestly pick the first points here just because that's going to be easier. So for that, we're going to make a rise of 1, a run of 2, which means at 1/2, and that's what you want to write is this part here, that it is 1/2. But again, if you decide to use a different set of points, that's up to you. I just like to go ahead and pick the 2 easiest points. Since I'm always starting from the left, I'm just going to go ahead and pick the left and the one that's right next to it because that's easier. But if you don't like that, you could start here. Again, you could pick any 2 set of points. The bottom line is when you do it, just do it. Make sure you get it over with, and don't let the extra points throw you off and make you think you have to do something extra special. Second graph. They want the rate of change. Again, we want to start from the leftmost point. This is not a confusing problem, so what we're going to do here is go down 2. Just don't forget that going down 2 means that that is a negative 2, and my run is 1, 2, 3, which means that my rate of change is negative 2/3. Question C. This is different. And the reason it's different is because if we count, you're already at a halfway point. And so what we have to do is make sure that we kind of slow down on this one. And again, this is a test question. This is a question that's on your test, and I want to make sure you at least have it. But if you look carefully at your picture, you notice it's counting by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, which is different than what we're used to, because all the other graphs that we have are counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is the reason why you actually can get away with this. So what you want to make sure you do is you understand that every jump is every full jump. So from here to here is actually 2 steps. Or what you can do is make sure you count and recognize that from here, again, we're going to do our count, but that from here to here is only 1, because if you're counting by 2 as a full jump, that means a half step is 1. So that would actually be 1. This would actually be 3, 5, 7. Again, doing that again. You're starting at the halfway point, you're going to a full, but you're counting by 2, which means that that is 1 step. Again, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the difference between this question that you're going to see on the test is that because it's counting by 2, every half jump is 1. You could even do that on your count up to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's just that I wouldn't do that because it can get kind of tricky. So I would just count 1 for this and then count, so that's 1, and then count by 2s from there. 3, 5, 7, which means my rise is 7, my run is 2, and that would be your slope. Now here's another thing you can do. You can count regular. You could go a full jump 1, full jump 2, full jump 3.5, over, I'm sorry, that's not 2. I messed that up because that is 4. See, good thing I said that second one, because remember we're jumping by 2, so it wouldn't be 1, 2, it would be 2, 4. But the way I'm looking at right now, if I was to just count them as I see them, that's 1 full jump, 2 full jumps, 3 full jump and a half, 2 jumps over. I could then put 3.5 over 2, the way we learned on our other stuff, and see that it does turn into 7 over 4. Again, this is a tricky question. The good news for you is that it does not determine whether or not you do well on a test. It's just a question that you have to be ready for. Otherwise, it's going to trick you into making a mistake or two. But again, we're going to see it tomorrow. We're going to take this quiz. You'll go over that quiz on Monday. We'll see how you do and give you a chance to find your weaknesses again and hopefully get better. That's really all I ask you to do, is just to try to get better at whatever you're doing. I don't expect for you to be perfect. I just want to make sure you know that you know more as we keep going forward. Write the equation slope-intercept line of the slope-intercept form of the line that passes through the pair of points. This question here, once they say write the equation, y equals mx plus b. From there, again, do we have an m? We don't. Do we have a b? We don't. So this is the one where you actually have to do your points. So 6, 4, 5, 6. We do 6 minus 4 because that's this minus that one. We do 5 minus 6 on the bottom. 6 minus 4 obviously is 2. 5 minus 6 is negative 1, which means that my m is negative 2. Remember then from there that we only need 1 point. And so on that 1 point, what we're going to do is plug in 4 for y because that's my y. Negative 2 for m. 6 for x. You're then going to go 4 equals negative 2 times 6. If you don't know what it is, you want to type that in, which is negative 12. And then again, because that 12 is negative, add 12 to both sides, getting 16 for your final answer there. But again, your final answer is not actually 16. It's putting your m and your b together, which is negative 2x plus 16. So looking at that, you've actually seen a lot of information for your test. Next week we're going to be looking at standard form, which is something else, and then we're going to have like one more week of kind of wrapping stuff up, and then we'll take the test. Keep in mind that this quiz tomorrow is, part of your, this quiz today actually is part of your quarter grade, but tomorrow is another quarter grade you're going to get, and I know that some of you aren't where you want to be grade wise, so make sure you keep fighting through that. And other than that, because there is probably at least a few minutes, what I'm going to do is put a Math XL assignment. So if you would please, if you have time, go to Math XL. There's an assignment up for you. Just make sure that you work on it, because I'll actually give you an extra 10 points on this which would be actually I'll give you an extra 5 points on this because I forgot it's a 50-point thing. So right now, if you've done everything you have a 50 out of 50. If you can go to Math Excel, answer those 10 questions that are on there, I'll give you 1 point per 2 questions. So if you answer 6 questions, then that'll lead to a 53 out of 50. If you answer 8 questions, that'll be a 54 out of 50. If you answer all 10, that'll be a 55 out of 50, and again, it'll be something that'll give you more room to kind of help yourself. I know it seems like I'm having a going out of business sale for your grade, but again, we are kind of going out of business. It is the end of the quarter, and I want to make sure that if you want your grade to be fixed, if you want your grade to be higher, that you take advantage of that. So please go over to Math Excel, see if you can answer those questions on there, and again, I will be checking your Math Excel today. The goal for your Math Excel today is to get all 10. Please make sure you stay under control. Please make sure you're not disrupting the classroom while you do it. If you want to work together with someone who's finished, fine, but again, make sure you're working and don't get in trouble for doing something silly, because if you do that, then you actually lose all those points even if you finish, because if your name goes on paper and you're not doing your job the right way, I'm going to make sure you don't get it. So other than that, like I said, going over to Math Excel, log in, and let's go ahead and knock that out. Oh yeah, don't forget to answer the question at the very end, because that also is part of your grade.